So I'm gonna have another video up showing replays of this deck that's going first and second against the meta decks, but in this video I want to show you some of the ridiculous going first hands I've opened and just what the ceiling of this deck can really be. So Brand opening Edge and Chain, that's an FDK. We get both Patchwork and Brand Infusion to hand. Even if we like get stopped, I have Patchwork and Desires. But our opponent does not have the Ash, so we get to do our whole thing. This is the 3 fusion spell, so this is a double to triple Masquerade setup with a Mirror Jade and Brand in red. Rebellion's gonna dump Tragedy, Tragedy get us Adlib, and then we shuffle back Tragedy and an Alabast for a Masquerade. And because we control Rebellion now, we can specialist Kit. Kit will get us our Brand in red. Brand in red gets us our Fallen Alabast. Then we'll make Mirror Jade with the Rebellion and Alabast. And Mirror Jade will send Albion to banish itself. Then we'll poly away our Adlib and our Alibur for another Masquerade. And the Adlib is going to bring back the Mirror Jade. Extra in a Pot of Desires. Draw into Foolish Burial and Called By. Foolish Dump Snow. You know, completely necessary. And then Albion's going to get us Brand red. Okay, so yeah, we have a live Mirror Jade, double Masquerade, Brand in red that will get us the third Mirror Jade, Called By, and a Snow Engrave. And our opponent's on Spright. So I hope they enjoy taking damage. I don't even need to do this, but I'm just using Mirror Jade to get them off level 2 bodies. Because I realized that they're not going to be able to... They're not going to have the life points to put that up any more level 2 bodies on the field. They can activate E-Telly, and that puts them down to 44. At which point I'm going to flip Brandon in red to get back to Adlib to make the third Mirror Masquerade, because I know they don't have an Ultimate Masquerade at this point. And I'm going to banish their level 2, because why not? They're going to summon Dark Begni because I'm going to snow them. At that point I don't think they have the life points to use starter anymore even, so... Well, now you must be wondering, what does my board look like if my Brand Infusion is not resolved? So case in point, this game, our opponent passes on an empty board. Okay, well, they must be bricking on something. So we're gonna click buttons, Gold Sark, get Tragedy. At this point, I feel a delay. I know they have Ash at this point, so it doesn't even matter. There's a foregone conclusion, unless I sack into Called By, I'm not gonna get my Brand Infusion resolved, but it's okay because we're gonna Allure and then draw into Patchwork, and I'm gonna use Albion to dump an Albaz to get another Allure. I'm gonna activate our second Allure into Edge and Chain. We're gonna activate Grass for 9 cards. Don't mill anything relevant, that's fine. Pot of Desires again. As you can tell, I'm trying to sack into a Called By the Grave potentially, because the Ash delay is just so obvious at this point. But no, we said we have Branded Lost, and then Brand Infusion, and we get Ashed. Oh no. So anyway, because we dumped an Albaz, I can just Stranded in red back the Albaz, and they're gonna Crow the Albaz. Huh, interesting. Now the thing is, Grass milled a Branded Sword, so we can just add back the Albaz anyways. And now we have a Poly in hand, so we can Poly for Rebellion, hard make Rebellion with Albaz and Dramaturge. Get our Brandon Lost Surge, summon back the Dramaturge, which is get back to Albion because we used all the other effects, and go into Mirror Jade. And here's the interaction. Once we summon Mirror Jade, use Dramaturge to negate your own Mirror Jade. That way, you can use its banish effect, or you can send Albion for cost to get the Albion Search, but because it's negated, you won't banish any of your own monsters. And then, also because you did not banish anything, your Mirror Jade is live for your opponent's turn. So through essentially an Ash on our Brand Infusion and a Called By and a Crow on our Brand in red, we still end on Mirror Jade, Dramaturge, and an Albion Search for Brand in red. Plus, you know, we drew like 6 cards, so of course we drew into good cards like a Banishment and Lost. Alright, here's the new updated build of Branded DESPIA I've been playing in our new Spright meta. And oh, don't worry, I'll explain. I'll explain. But just throwing it out there. I have like a against non-runic variants of Spright. I basically have like a 99% win rate. I think I only lost to one non-runic Spright, like ever playing this deck. And runic Spright even like it's a bit more even. Although I would honestly, it still felt favor at least when I played against a ladder runic Spright players, since like it's like more of a who goes first has the advantage. But yeah, this deck is definitely ultra competitive in this new meta for a few reasons. So reason number one that I just brought up is the DESPIA, the branded DESPIA engine is really strong versus the Spright engine. Mainly because the Spright engine's biggest weaknesses are big dudes with like beefy attack points. They have to jump through a lot of hoops to even out like just a single Mirror Jade on board. You can't do it through any rank 2. Any of their like rank 2s or link 2s. They have to like commit to a... The best thing they can do is like commit to a gigantic Spright with an elf underneath it. And then if they clear the Mirror Jade, they also have to deal with the fact that they can't set up the board after, since then they're just gonna get it nuked in the end phase. Other options, like the same goes if they try to go for a Zeus play, if they go for a Pixies play. And to tie into that, you're never gonna get OTK'd by Spright. Like if you have any sort of fusion on board, it's like impossible to just die that turn. Which means that you'll end up playing a lot of grind games with Spright. And when you play grind games with branded DESPIA against almost any other deck, like you win. You get to recur multiple of your branded spells every turn. Each of them pluses you in a different way. Each of them breaks boards and applies pressure. Like resolving branded fusion or branded in red for consecutive turns does like so much more. They're so much more impactful than even Spright. The Spright engine does. Like the Spright's engine's most impactful form of removal is like Smasher, which is incredibly costly. Tends to get rid of their follow-up occasionally, and it's literally just it's like boneless Mirror Jade. We got Branded DESPIA has Smashers every turn, recurable multiple times per turn. And speaking of, as you see, if you're looking at this deck, there's no hand traps, and you're only running 5 board breakers in a 60 card build. Well, yeah, that's because, once again, as I've mentioned in my other branded DESPIA deck profiles, is that the branded engine is so good playing the boards, and like Spright boards are no exception. Like obviously, if you draw droplets into a Spright board, like their board is cooked, like it's gone no matter what. But even just like having stuff like patchwork to threaten chimeras with branded fusions, just resolving any sort of fusion spell can threaten the entire board. Essentially, you have like Chimera and Mirror Jade able to rid of the 3 biggest threats, and then because most of their monsters that aren't exactly elf or carrot in defense mode have low stats, the normal summon Alibur that you get off of either a strategy search or that you draw into out of your 15 ways to obtain it can also run over a monster. And then you have stuff like Branded Red set for their follow-up. And that's just off of one fusion spell. This, like, you draw multiple fusion spells. That's just multiple ways to bait negations. They're only gonna, if they end on carrot at all, they're only gonna have 1 carrot, and their carrot has to negate a fusion spell. Otherwise, it's gone anyways. And another trend that favors branded DESPIA in this meta is the shifting of certain non-engine cards from hand traps to board breakers. or at the very least the increased usage of board breakers. And it's very rare that you'll see like the 12 plus hand trap deck anymore, especially on ladder. You see a lot more stuff like Dark Rulers, or Droplets, or Triple Tactus Talons, or Evenly matches. And that's like favorable for Branded DESPIA in two ways. One way is, well, because board breakers are better, you know, Branded DESPIA is better positioned in the meta since it's really hard to fit a lot of hand traps into Branded DESPIA in the first place while maintaining a good engine count. Yes, even in 60, it's quite hard to fit in hand traps. But since board breakers are more impactful now, you can just run more board breakers instead of like the hand traps that you could barely fit in and aren't good by themselves anyways. You have to open 2 hand traps to be impactful this meta, so that just frees up deck building a bit. And secondly, board breakers are not as good versus Branded DESPIA. Like, the way to stop Branded DESPIA is you gotta hand trap them. You gotta cut off the access to Branded Fusion, to like Resolving Tragedy, or get even Branded in red for Albas. Like, you don't want them to get their engine going, because once the engine starts, it's recurable. So even if you do manage to stop it, they'll just do it again next turn. You have to cut it. You have to cut it off before I even get there. And the only way to do that is with hand traps. When people run like board breakers and stuff, it's not really effective since Branded DESPIA's disruption is not focused on just monsters. It's like spread out in all different parts of the field. You have disruptions in the front row, obviously, like you have from Mirror Jade and Dragostapelia and Masquerades, but that's only like half your disruption. You also have to deal with Branded in red, which does not get hit by Forbidden Droplet. It does not get hit by Dark Ruler no more. And you can, so even if you like negate my monster effects, I'm gonna flip over Branded in red. I'm gonna Chimera your field, and then I'm gonna summon back the Mirror Jade, and so no longer negate it. And you're still facing multiple disruptions through a board breaker. And for evenly matched, like, I don't think I've lost a single game where I've gotten evenly matched. That's like straight up. Usually what happens is oh yeah, they're gonna force me to banish like 5 of my cards. But what you do is you chain Brand in red. Bring back an Adlib or whatever. Summon your fusion of choice, either a Dragostapelia or a Masquerade. And then you keep that one fusion monster, evenly resolves on a new chain. Adlib triggers, reviving back your Mirror Jade anyway. So now you still have 2 fusions on the board, and that's not even accounting for the possibility of having a Mercurial in hand, which is highly searchable, and a Fairy Tale Stone Engrave, which is highly dumpable in multiple ways in this deck. Even Triple Tactus Talons, which is arguably the most effective quote-unquote board breaker against Branded DESPIA, since you can theoretically take my monsters, then save yourself from a Chimera. Well, obviously that doesn't quite work if I control more than one fusion or more than one monster. Then you still can't save yourself from Chimera. And if I have a 2 monsters on the field, then I also have no incentive to flip a Brand in red early for you to be able to take my Chimera before I could use its effect. And all of the while, the Mirror Jade, even when it does to get negated, even if you do wish to Forbidden Droplet or whatever, it's still dumped into Albion to the grave. You're still gonna have to deal with the Albion search. You're most likely gonna have to deal with some sort of tragedy add back of a branded spell too. So anyway, why 60 card version? Well, honestly, it's because I got tired of trying to fit this deck list into like a concise like 40 card or like a near 40 card build, because I would always feel like every time I do, I have to cut some sort of engine from the deck. Like I'd be cutting parts of the Patrok engine, then I'd be drawing Patroclus, I'd be cutting the Branded Lost engine, and then like I love Branded Lost is like really good against a lot of matchups. Sometimes you cut. I was cutting Super Poly because like it was just, you know, for space issues, because putting in both Super Poly and Droplets in the 40 card build was like very tight. I couldn't run Branded Sword, I couldn't run Branded Retribution. I wanted to run more Albions, but like I couldn't justify running what is essentially more Upstrike Albions in such a tight build. So eventually I just said like F it, you know, we're just gonna put in every single piece of engine into the deck and max out on all copies. And then eventually you realize that that's actually just a huge amount of cards, and you're like near 60 anyway. So I was like, yeah, I might as well just go all the way, you know, and put in Triple Pot of Desires, since this is like a really good card. It's Ash bait for people that don't pay attention to the fact that you're on 60. And also it's like because you're running 60, you're also like banishing, and you're running a bunch of 3-ofs that you normally wouldn't run, such as Kit and Albion and Edgem Chain. Like the likelihood that you're gonna banish like anything important is honestly not that high, and even if you do, you have alternative lines in your plays. I've never like been disappointed when, like, I've never been, let's just say I've always been more happy with the 2 cards that I've drawn than like the 10 cards I've banished. I've never been like I've never wished that I didn't resolve the Desires. As for consistency, like my hands are consistently better I found in the 60 card build than they are in the smaller deck count builds, because again, I'm filling the extra deck space with more engine pieces. So just like relatively, in a 60 card build, more of my deck is engine than it is in a 40 card build. And the biggest downside to running a larger deck size is that traditionally you would draw non-engine cards less. You know, stuff like your board breakers or your outs to stuff like Maxi or Ash. You know, that would be a downside to it. But I've mentioned that because the deck's engine is so strong and playing into boards that you don't mind, like you could have a board break in your hand, but just having more engine pieces to be able to play through more disruptions is just as fine. And as for Maxi, you know, this is probably the meta deck that's hurt the least by Maxi, since you can still put up 2 interruptions in 2 summons, a la Sword Soul. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it sucks, you know, you can't use more extenders, but it's bearable. I've won plenty of games. In fact, I win more often than not when my opponent Maxis me when I'm going first. And as for Ash Blossom is probably like the biggest thing you're thinking, like you're just decreasing your chances of being able to draw a Colored Blight or draw a Gamma for Ash and Brand Fusion, which is true. But however, because this deck's engine size is bigger, I'm running more stuff that lets me play through an Ash on Brand Fusion. Like I've probably, in my entire Diamond grind, I played this deck from like the entirety of Diamond, I've probably lost to Ash on my Branded Fusion exactly once that I can remember. Because this deck just has so many more ways. First of all, it has more Ash baits, you know. If you have a Grass and you have a Branded Fusion in hand, and they have an Ash, like they're not gonna like let the Grass resolve. Like they're still gonna Ash the Grass, and then your Branded Fusion's free for the rest of the turns. You're also, since again a larger, I keep saying this, a larger engine count, more copies of Poly, even DESPIA Feeler, which is a searchable Poly by 5 other copies of Alibur, essentially. And branded in red, with combinations with stuff like Grass and Albion to dump Albast into the grave, you have just infinite ways to fuse without branded fusion. Like as you saw in like one of the showcase combos I got, where I got Ashe and Crowed, and it didn't even matter. She still set up an impressive board without branded fusion. Like if this resolves and you have all the other stuff, like your board's like unbreakable. Like your opponent like probably can't play. But even if they do stop the branded fusion, the extra copies of fusion spells lets you play around it much more than lower deck size build where you're running less copies of fusion spells relatively compared to the deck size. In fact, let's count all of those starters and all the ways that can start playing. You have the 2 Albert plus the 3 Kit, so that's 5. 3 Brand Fusion, that's 8. 2 Grass, that's 10. 2 Opening, that's 12. Foolish plus Gold Sark, that's 14. So 14 out of 60 are 1-card starters. It's like about a quarter of your deck. It's relatively like close to like 10 in 40 1-card starters. Then keep in mind we're running 6 draw spells that these are just essentially Pot of Greed, you know, for his deck. Then a bunch of 2-card combinations. If you somehow manage to not draw a single 1-card starter, that means your hand is all of the other 2-card combos the deck has, such as a way to poly with a Tragedy, a way to brand red while dumping Albast in the grave, and you can dump Albast in the grave with Albion. Should you have a brand red in hand, that's another way to start playing. And then going second, it's even like going second. Obviously, you have the 6-card in hand, but now your Forbidden Droplets are live ways to start playing, as you can ditch stuff like Edge and Chain. You can ditch these branded spells into the grave to re-add stuff back to your hand. Same goes for Super Poly as well. And the things that are like non-standard in this build compared to normal standard DESPIA builds that might need some more explaining are probably Albion and Grass interactions. So why is Grass good in this deck? Well, obviously you can mill Tragedy, you can mill Snow, yeah, and you get more fodder for Snow than you normally would. Like, you know, that in itself is pretty good. Just like more ways to trigger Tragedy. But keep in mind, you can also mill Albion, and Albion, when it's in the grave or hand, it's just when it's in the hand you get to draw a card. When it's in the grave you don't, but you usually send it there for free. You can send any Branded Spell Trap or Fallen Albast into the grave. So like just imagine you Grass for a second, you trigger Tragedy, you have a chance to mill Snow, you probably milled an Albion, and you probably milled a bunch of Branded Spell Traps like Branded Red, Fusion and stuff. So then you can use the Albion to dump the Retribution into the grave, and you essentially just added, and you can essentially add any of those milled Branded Spell Traps out of the 20 you milled from deck back off of Grass. So you go like +2, +3 off of the grass, and your grave is set up. You probably have it Fallen Albast too, so now all your brand and red are starters too. In fact, if you hard open brand red, you can brand it in red back of Albast to do your entire combo line. You've triggered Tragedy, you've made a Mirror Jade, all without the need of having to resolve a branded fusion. And you don't even have to use your Mirror Jade Banish, since you can have if you have a Retribution in your grave or you have an Albion in your grave, you can dump a Retribution to re-add back the brand in red, and then set it for your opponent's turn. You know, it's just like a bunch of plays that aren't normally available to the branded deck, to the standard branded decks. Oh, and keep in mind, branded Retribution, branded Sword, they have on-field effects too. You 90% use them for the grave effects, but branded Retribution in the late game, you can you use it as basically a Solemn Warning that also recycles back your Albions and possible Mirror Jades and the Bellions that you wind up getting killed. And you might be wondering, how do you add this back if like you're just gonna banish this in there? If you're just gonna banish this turn one anyways. Well, Spriggan's kit can add branded spell trap back from the banish as well. So if you need a recycle that happens to double as a Solemn Warning, you can re-add back Retribution. And branded sword, you can summon as many 2500 attack, 2000 defense Ice Blade tokens for banished branded spells engraved, and I've used this effect once. I won a game off this effect because with grass you mill like 3 to 4 like branded spells, and then you like flip branded sword, banish 4, summon 4 2500 attack tokens on the field, and attack for game. Yeah. And and guess what? Sprite's not gonna out your 4 2500 attack tokens either. And now for the extra deck, this is pretty standardish if you know my brand DESPIA builds. Triple Albion, since a lot of times you trigger, especially now with like grass and like just max drop you the draw cards, you're gonna trigger tragedy so often turn 1 that you don't need to send it to the grave of Brand Fusion, so you can send a Snow for Brand Fusion and make Albion. And because you do that, you go through your Albions more quickly, so it's good to have more copies of it to send with Mirror Jade. And Lubellion is like the one-off because you just recycle it every time you want. That's fine. And then triple Masquerade. So the triple Masquerade part, like putting up 3 Masquerades in the field at once is not necessarily the goal, but it's more important that you always maintain 2 Masquerades, because your turn 1 board, if you have a hand that can facilitate it, if you saw my last Brand DESPIA video where I show you how, your board's usually going to be like a Mirror Jade, double Masquerade, and a Brand Red set. Right? They're always usually going to have an out to at least 1 Masquerade. Whether it be like a Flashing Fire from Runic, or like an Imperm possibly, or whatever, or if they have like even something like a Lava Golem, or if they have a Droplet and they only want to out your Mirror Jade and 1 Masquerade so that they don't burn for 1200, because burning for 600, most decks can play through that. Most. not that one Spiral guy, but 2 is when it gets hard for people to play through. So what tends to happen a lot is people will use their like 1 out on a Mirror Jade, on a Masquerade, excuse me, so that they only burn for like 600, and so that they can play the game. And after they expend that out and burn themselves for a little bit, that's when you can sense if you feel like they're desperate, you can flip your brand in red, and then just put the second mask and just make the second Masquerade after they spend 1 of their outs on 1 of your Masquerades. And usually then the game is like oftentimes over, because they've already expended their out, but they're still gonna burn for 1200 every activation while dealing with Mirror Jade. It's many people will simply be unable to play through that. Mirror Jade, the double Mirror Jade, the 1 Dragostapelia, and the 1 Starving Venom, since we're running Super Palsy, is pretty standard. This stuff here is I might have been a bit too ambitious with some of this stuff. So first of all, Proskenion is for exactly Sword Soul when they Protoss you, since anytime you play Sword Soul going second, they're going to try to Protoss you now in Spright meta, and having a Proskenion with Super Poly allows you to like win the game on the spot, since you summon any of your DESPIA monsters, and then you Super Poly your DESPIA monster plus their Chi-Shao and their Protoss into Proskenion. Fun fact, Proskenion is a light monster. I don't know why. Make it, and then it's a 3200. You attack over their Baron, and then main phase 2, you revive their Baron with Proskenion. So you clear your whole board and have a Baron negate after they Protoss you. And then you win the game. So only one Chimera was because I wanted to fit in this thing. And I didn't really need a second Guardian Chimera, so it was fine, but at the same time I only went into this like once. So the idea behind Triff is you're not really using, this isn't really a board breaking target. Nobody's gonna end on 3 dark monsters on the field, even if they tried. It's like just really hard. The idea is you're going first, or you have a Super Poly or Banishment set. And that's another reason why Brand DESPIA is better in a Spright meta, because now you have a deck that's just providing you fodder for Super Poly and Banishment, being dark monsters. So they're never gonna play around Super Poly if they're playing Spright. They tend to go blue into Jet like so often. And then when they do that, you could like just fuse away their field and get rid of the 2 level 2s and make Starving Venom. But it's a lot more impactful if like you could use one of your own monsters and then plus their Jet and blue and go into a Triff. Or if you're greedy, if they made a Gigantic, you could also use their Gigantic. And then does the same thing of removing their level 2 bodies or rank 2 bodies. But Triff also has a Solemn Warning effect. For the next time they try to summon from the extra deck, if they want to try to summon an Elf or another Gigantic, you already have the out for that in Triff. So yeah, that was the theory behind it. I summoned it once, it worked out pretty well, but the 15 slot could be debatable. It could be if I had a Lenitus, I would have won him against a Dragon Link deck that went full combo turn 1. So maybe, maybe I don't know. This slot's up for debate. But I also like how just having this is another way to, if you hard draw Super Poly and that means you can search Banishment, and then you have a way to, after you use like say your Mirror Jade, you could use it. You could have a way to put your Mirror Jade back into the grave of Super Poly by using a target like Triff, and then that will make your Banishment live to be able to bring back the Mirror Jade, and then be able to use it that way. Anyway, that's most of the theory behind this build. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and also if you haven't already, go check out the video the replay video where I have a bunch more replays of this deck in action. Mostly beating up on Spright. Yeah, so